January 17, 1945, Okinawa Prefecture, Japan. The air smelled of sulfur and salt water. Dawn had not yet broken over the jagged cliffs of Hacksaw Ridge, but the darkness was alive, trembling with the distant rumble of artillery, the metallic clink of equipment, the whispered prayers of men who knew they were climbing toward death. Beneath the volcanic rock, the earth itself seemed to pulse with violence. The ridge rose like a broken tooth from the Pacific, 400 feet of sheer escarpment that the Japanese had transformed into a fortress of steel and stone. At its base, a young medic from Lynchburg, Virginia, tightened the straps of his aid bag and whispered a final prayer. His name was Desmond Doss. He carried no rifle, no pistol, no bayonet, only gauze, morphine, and an unshakable conviction that he could save lives without taking them. Above him, the ridge waited. The Americans had been told it would take 3 days to secure the position. It would take 3 weeks. They had been told casualties would be manageable. They would be catastrophic. And they had been told that no man who refused to carry a weapon could survive in combat. Desmond Doss would prove them wrong in a way that would rewrite the very definition of courage. To understand what happened on Hacksaw Ridge, you must first understand what the American military had become by 1945. This was not the untested force that had stumbled through North Africa in 1942, nor the Green Divisions that had waded ashore at Normandy. By the time the Pacific Campaign reached Okinawa, the United States had transformed itself into the most technologically sophisticated, logistically abundant, and ideologically driven military machine the world had ever seen. The Americans brought flamethrowers that could incinerate bunkers from 150 feet away. They brought naval artillery that could level entire hillsides. They brought air superiority so absolute that Japanese reinforcements could barely reach the island. And yet, on Hacksaw Ridge, none of it mattered. The Japanese defenders had spent months carving a labyrinth of tunnels and caves into the volcanic rock. They had stockpiled ammunition, water, and rice in underground chambers that could withstand direct hits from battleship guns. They had positioned machine gun nests in interlocking fields of fire, transforming every approach into a killing corridor. American tanks couldn't climb the cliffs. American bombers couldn't see into the caves. American flamethrowers couldn't reach the deepest tunnels. The ridge had become a fortress that could only be taken by men on foot, advancing yard by yard through fire and shrapnel, bleeding for every inch of scorched earth. And so the men of the 77th Infantry Division climbed. They climbed rope ladders swaying against the cliff face, their boots slipping on volcanic ash, their fingers raw and bleeding. They climbed through machine gun fire that sounded like tearing canvas, through mortar rounds that detonated in black flowers of smoke and stone. They climbed knowing that the moment they reached the top, they would be exposed on open ground with nowhere to hide, nothing but speed and luck to carry them across the killing zone to the Japanese positions. And when they finally pulled themselves over the edge and began their assault, the ridge erupted. Desmond Doss climbed.
The Japanese defenders had expected many things from the Americans. They had expected the usual overwhelming firepower, the artillery barrages that shook the earth, the naval bombardments that turned night into day, the endless waves of infantrymen armed with automatic rifles and grenades. They had expected the brute force that had characterized every American assault since Guadalcanal. What they did not expect was a medic who would crawl through their crossfire to reach wounded men. What they did not expect was a soldier who refused to carry a weapon but would not leave the battlefield. What they did not expect was Desmond Doss. By midday on April 29th, the American assault had stalled. The 77th Division had managed to establish a precarious foothold on the ridge, but Japanese counterattacks had shattered their lines. Men lay scattered across the open ground, some dead, many dying, all of them beyond the reach of evacuation. The order came to retreat. The Americans withdrew down the cliffs, leaving their wounded behind. Standard procedure in an impossible situation. Accept the losses, regroup, try again tomorrow. Desmond Doss did not retreat. While his company descended the rope ladders, he remained on the ridge, alone, unarmed, surrounded by enemy soldiers who were even then emerging from their tunnels to sweep the battlefield. He moved through the smoke and fire like a ghost, crawling from one wounded man to the next, checking pulses, applying tourniquets, injecting morphine into shattered limbs. When he found a man who could be moved, he dragged him to the edge of the cliff, and then he did something that would have seemed impossible to anyone watching from below. He lowered them down, one by one. Using a rope sling he fashioned from cargo netting and his own makeshift knots, a technique he would later say came to him as divine inspiration, Desmond secured each wounded soldier and slowly, carefully, hand over hand, lowered them down the 400-foot cliff face to the aid station below. It took 20 minutes per man, sometimes longer if the soldier was unconscious or delirious with pain, sometimes shorter if Japanese soldiers spotted him and forced him to hide in the rocks, waiting for the fire to pass before resuming his work. He worked through the afternoon. He worked through the night. He worked through the next day as American artillery resumed its bombardment and Japanese snipers hunted for targets along the cliff edge. By the time Desmond Doss finally descended from Hacksaw Ridge, he had lowered 75 men to safety. 75 lives saved by a man who had been mocked during training as a coward. 75 soldiers who would have died on that volcanic rock, their bodies lost to the caves and tunnels, their families receiving telegrams that began with the words, "missing in action." 75 men who owed their survival to a medic who believed that faith and conviction could accomplish what weapons could not. The historical record preserves the details with the dry precision of military documentation, but beneath the numbers lies a truth that transcends statistics. After-action reports from the 77th Infantry Division describe the evacuation as unprecedented and beyond the scope of standard medical procedures. Letters from the men Desmond saved speak of a figure moving through fire as if protected by something we couldn't see, of hands that worked with impossible speed and certainty, of a voice that kept repeating the same prayer over and over, "Lord, please help me get one more, just one more."
Japanese prisoners of war, interrogated after the battle, reported seeing the American medic, but described confusion among their snipers. Several stated that they had clear shots, but their rifles jammed or misfired. Others claimed they aimed and fired, but somehow missed a target that was barely 20 yards away, exposed on open ground. One prisoner, a former school teacher from Osaka, told his interrogators that he watched the medic through his rifle scope for nearly 10 minutes, waiting for orders to shoot, but the order never came. When asked why, he said his commanding officer had observed the same scene and declared that killing a man engaged in such work would bring dishonor to their unit. Whether this account was truth or myth, it entered the oral history of the 77th Division and became part of the legend that surrounded Desmond Doss for the rest of his life. What cannot be disputed is the physical evidence. 75 soldiers evacuated from an active combat zone by a single unarmed medic, working alone under sustained enemy fire for more than 30 hours. The American military had never seen anything like it. But the story of Hacksaw Ridge is not merely the story of one man's extraordinary courage. It is the story of what that courage revealed about the nation he served. In the person of Desmond Doss, the contradictions of American ideology found their strangest and most profound expression. Here was a country that had industrialized warfare to an unprecedented degree, that had married assembly line efficiency to military logistics, that had weaponized science itself in the form of radar, sonar, and soon, atomic energy. And yet this same country produced a soldier who refused to kill, who believed that moral conviction mattered more than firepower, who demonstrated that the truest form of strength might be the strength to heal rather than destroy.
The Japanese defenders on Okinawa had been trained to see Americans as materialistic barbarians, as spiritually empty consumers who worshipped machinery and comfort. They had been told that American soldiers lacked the discipline and honor to endure true hardship, that they would crumble when faced with an enemy willing to die for his beliefs. Desmond Doss shattered that narrative completely. Here was an American who possessed a faith so absolute that he would risk death rather than compromise it. Here was a soldier whose discipline exceeded that of any samurai, who endured conditions that would have broken most men, and who did so not for emperor or nation, but for a principle that transcended both. In the days following his rescue of the 75, word spread through the Japanese tunnel networks. American medics had always been respected. The Red Cross armband granted a measure of protection even in the chaos of Pacific combat. But Desmond Doss became something more. He became evidence that the American enemy was not what Tokyo had claimed. If a nation could produce men like this, men who would die to save others even at the cost of their own safety, then perhaps the entire ideological foundation of the war was built on lies. This realization did not stop the fighting. The battle for Okinawa would continue for another 2 months, claiming over 100,000 Japanese lives and nearly 50,000 American casualties. But in the tunnels and caves of Hacksaw Ridge, something had shifted. Japanese soldiers who surrendered in the war's final weeks often mentioned the medic who would not kill. Some kept the story alive in POW camps. A few carried it home to a devastated Japan, where it became a whispered counter-narrative to the official history of American barbarism. There was an object that came to symbolize Desmond Doss and his impossible rescue, though he never carried it as a talisman or good luck charm. It was simply part of his equipment, standard issue to every combat medic, the aid bag. Canvas and leather, weighing 14 pounds when fully stocked, containing 32 pockets and pouches for bandages, sulfa powder, morphine syrettes, tourniquets, scissors, tape. By the time Desmond descended from Hacksaw Ridge, his aid bag was empty. Every bandage used, every dose of morphine administered, every tourniquet applied to a shattered limb. The bag itself was shredded by shrapnel, stained with blood and volcanic ash, held together by improvised knots and sheer stubbornness. That bag represented something essential about American abundance and its paradoxes. The United States could afford to give every medic enough supplies to treat dozens of casualties. It could afford to develop sulfa drugs that prevented infection, morphine that dulled unbearable pain, plasma that replaced lost blood. It could afford to train men like Desmond Doss not merely to fight, but to heal, to preserve life even in the act of taking it. And when those supplies ran out, when the last bandage was used and the last morphine syrette emptied, American medics improvised with a creativity born of necessity and abundance both, tearing their own uniforms for bandages, using rifle slings as tourniquets, fashioning stretchers from salvaged cargo nets. Japanese medics carried aid bags too, but by 1945, those bags were often empty before the battle even began. The naval blockade had strangled supply lines. There was no morphine, no plasma, no sulfa powder. Wounded Japanese soldiers on Okinawa often lay untreated in the tunnels, their cries echoing through the volcanic rock because there was nothing left to treat them with. The contrast could not have been starker. American medics running out of supplies because they had saved so many lives. Japanese medics running out because there were no supplies to begin with. Desmond Doss's empty aid bag became a relic of that abundance, proof that American industrial might extended even to mercy, that the nation's capacity to heal was as overwhelming as its capacity to destroy. On May 21, 1945, 3 weeks after his rescue of the 75, Desmond Doss was wounded by a grenade during another assault on Hacksaw Ridge. Shrapnel tore through his legs and lower body, injuries severe enough to end his combat service. As he waited for evacuation, a tank approached his position, and in the confusion of battle,
He rolled off his stretcher to make room for another wounded soldier whose injuries seemed more critical. Minutes later, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. By the time he reached the field hospital, he had been on Okinawa for 45 days. He had treated over 200 casualties. He had saved 75 men in a single impossible night, and he had done all of it without firing a shot. The United States Army awarded him the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, presented by President Harry Truman in a ceremony at the White House. Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the medal for actions in combat. The citation praised his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions.
But the words felt inadequate to describe what he had actually done, the transformation he represented. Historians would later debate whether Desmond Doss was an anomaly or an embodiment, an exception to American military culture or its purest expression. The debate missed the point. He was both. He was the exception that proved the rule, the outlier who revealed the hidden core. In a nation defined by contradictions, violence and mercy, individualism and sacrifice, technology and faith, Desmond Doss had somehow managed to embody them all without resolving them. He had shown that an American soldier could be both absolutely committed to his principles and absolutely committed to his brothers in arms, that conviction and pragmatism need not be enemies, that the choice between killing and dying was not the only choice available. In the decades following the war, Desmond Doss rarely spoke of Hacksaw Ridge. He returned to Virginia, worked as a carpenter, raised a family. The injuries he sustained on Okinawa plagued him for the rest of his life. He lost a lung to tuberculosis contracted in a military hospital, endured dozens of surgeries to repair the damage from shrapnel and bullets, gradually lost his hearing from the constant artillery bombardment. But when pressed about his actions on the ridge, he always gave the same answer. "I was just doing my job. Those were my brothers up there." The men he saved never forgot. They formed an association, met regularly, called him on his birthday. Some traveled across the country to visit him in his modest home in Alabama. They brought their children and grandchildren to meet the medic who had lowered their fathers and grandfathers down a cliff in the middle of a battle. They told stories of waking up in field hospitals with no memory of how they had gotten there, only the vague recollection of hands working in darkness, of a voice repeating that prayer, "Just one more, Lord. Help me get one more." Those gatherings became their own form of testimony, evidence that the impossible had occurred and left permanent marks on the world. Each man present was living proof that faith and determination could accomplish what weapons could not, that a single unarmed medic could alter the course of 75 lives, and through them, the lives of hundreds more, children who were born, businesses that were built, communities that were shaped by men who should have died on a volcanic ridge in the Pacific, but did not. There is a photograph from 1995 taken at a reunion of the 77th Infantry Division. Desmond Doss sits in a wheelchair at the center of a group of elderly men, all of them veterans of Okinawa, some of them survivors of Hacksaw Ridge. They are looking at the camera, but their attention is clearly on him. The expressions on their faces transcend simple gratitude. There is reverence there, and love, and something else, a recognition that they are in the presence of something rare and inexplicable, a living reminder that humanity is capable of acts that defy logic and expectation.
Desmond Doss died in 2006 at the age of 87. His funeral was attended by dozens of the men he saved, many of them in their 80s and 90s, some traveling from across the country despite failing health. They came because they owed him a debt that could never be repaid, because his life had made their lives possible, because he had proven that the values he claimed to believe in, faith, mercy, the sanctity of human life, were not merely abstract principles, but forces powerful enough to reshape reality itself.
The story of Hacksaw Ridge entered American mythology, retold in books and films, taught in military academies as an example of courage beyond measure. But the deepest truth of that story is not about courage alone. It is about the strange alchemy of American identity. The way this nation has always contained multitudes, contradictions that somehow coexist without destroying each other. The same country that built atomic bombs also produced conscientious objectors. The same military that perfected the flamethrower also honored a man who refused to carry a weapon. The same culture that celebrated rugged individualism also recognized that the highest form of individualism might be the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Epilogue: The Rope and the Ridge. Long after the last shots were fired on Okinawa, long after the tunnels were sealed and the caves abandoned, long after the jungle reclaimed the volcanic rock, one image endured in the memories of those who had been there. The sight of a rope swaying against the cliff face of Hacksaw Ridge, a wounded soldier suspended in the air, slowly descending toward safety while machine gun fire crackled overhead and artillery shells burst in the smoke above. That rope became a symbol, not just of rescue, but of connection. It was the thread that linked life to life, brother to brother, the world of the living to the realm of the dead from which these men had been retrieved. In the act of lowering those 75 soldiers down the ridge, Desmond Doss had performed more than a rescue. He had enacted a parable about American power and its purpose. For all the nation's technological sophistication, all its industrial might, all its capacity to project force across oceans and continents, the ultimate measure of its strength was this: the willingness of one man to risk everything to save another. Not because it was ordered, not because it was expected, but because it was right. That rope, improvised from cargo netting and faith, proved stronger than all the weapons on the ridge. It held when everything else had failed. It connected the impossible heights to the reachable ground, and in doing so, it revealed a truth that the architects of war had forgotten: that humanity's greatest innovations are not the tools we create to destroy, but the courage we summon to heal. That abundance is measured not in firepower, but in mercy. That the only victory worth claiming is the victory over death itself. 75 men descended that rope and returned to a world that was not supposed to be theirs. They lived lives they were never meant to live, loved people they were never meant to meet, built futures that should have died on Hacksaw Ridge. And every one of those lives was a testament to the impossible rescue, to the medic who would not kill, to the rope that held when everything else gave way. That is the secret American advantage that no enemy could counter and no weapon could match. The stubborn, irrational, magnificent belief that every single life, even in the midst of mechanized slaughter, even on the killing grounds of total war, is worth saving, even when it seems impossible, especially when it seems impossible.